Good evening, everybody. I hear an echo. Is that okay, Jillian? What do you think? Can you folks hear an echo? Yeah, it's kind of weird, huh? You think it stopped? Okay, yeah, it did. All right. Good evening again. My name is Scott Wolf. I am Executive Director of Grow Smart Rhode Island, and we are very pleased to have you all here tonight and to be working with the dynamic team at Aquidneck Land Trust on this workshop series that's examining ways that creative transportation, housing, and conservation policies and strategies can maintain this exceptional island soul and magic while improving the quality of daily life here and expanding economic opportunities for all the residents here. We at Grow Smart Rhode Island are enthusiastic about helping to lead this workshop series because our mission is, it's an ambitious one. It's to lead and engage Rhode Islanders in advancing neighborhood revitalization, environmental stewardship, and economic opportunity for all. That's what we do on Tuesday morning. Then we deal with the rest of things after that. Little joke. And we believe that the key paths to achieving these lofty goals are expanding affordable transportation and housing choices for Rhode Islanders, sustaining and revitalizing our main streets, our downtowns, and our village centers, and safeguarding our outstanding but fragile urban-rural balance. And I think when you talk about fragile and outstanding urban-rural balance, you want to look that up in the dictionary. You got a picture of Aquidneck Island, probably more so than any other distinct region in Rhode Island. You just got this incredible urban-rural, you could argue urban-suburban rural balance, but it's fragile and it kind of hangs by a thread. And that's a lot of what the Aquidneck Land Trust has outlined in its report about the sprawl threats to Aquidneck Island's future. So before turning it over to Alex of Aquidneck Land Trust, I want to just thank some key organizations and individuals, starting with the Van Buren Charitable Foundation for making this workshop series possible, to the AARP chapter in Rhode Island for being a generous supporter of our full 2023 public outreach activity, to Aquidneck Land Trust, of course, for being resourceful and a visionary partner in this and last year's workshop series, to the Aquidneck Island municipalities and their talented staffs here tonight for your extensive engagement and input, which is indispensable to making these workshops impactful, to making them relevant. And last but not least, to all of you participating in this session. I know some of you are participating virtually. Hello, virtual participants, and hello, participants in front of me. Your community commitment and your grassroots engagement are really critical ingredients in protecting and improving this special island's quality of life, its quality of place, and its economic opportunity. So pleased to introduce my partner in positive crime here, Alex Schuman, the Conservation Director of Aquidneck Land Trust, who's a terrific partner, collaborator, resourceful, savvy, and deeply committed to making the best life possible for this wonderful place. Alex, floor is yours.
Thanks, Scott, for that very kind introduction. And thanks once again to the Van Buren Charitable Foundation for sponsoring this great slate of workshops over the next month. So for anyone who doesn't know about the Land Trust, we've been around for around 35 years here on the island. And we have a three-part mission. So the first is to protect open space all over the island. That ranges from everything from farmland to parks and trails to watershed protection properties to habitat land. And we've done that on over 11.5% of the entire island. The second piece of our mission relates to stewardship. So I'm trying to manage the land with a land ethic and trying to make sure that the land we protect stays in conservation for not just this generation, but all future generations. And the third piece is to connect folks with the environment and the outdoors here on Aquidneck Island. And we've been successful over the last 35 years, thanks to our many supporters. So thank you so much if you support the land trust and land conservation here on the island. So having said all that, why is ALT involved in land use planning workshops? Well, in 2019, we commissioned a study to understand the potential impacts of future development on Aquidneck Island. And we worked with consultants, Sasaki Associates, who are out of Boston, to look at two future scenarios for Aquidneck Island. The first scenario was the status quo, basically. We looked at what's happened in the past and what's happening right now, and we projected out into the future. And the second scenario was a scenario that accommodated the exact same amount of housing as the first, but looked at a future where smart growth was used and when we developed smartly. And when we looked at what those scenarios look like, in the first status quo scenario, we were shocked to see that within a 30-year period, all of the open space on Aquidneck Island was either already protected or developed. And that's all land that we care about. That's farmland, that's habitat, that's watershed protection areas, all that great open space. And relevant to our topic tonight, we estimated 8,000 new cars on the road in that scenario as well. And really, this 30-year period is probably much less. This analysis was done right before the COVID pandemic. And as we all know, the real estate market has gone crazy here after that. So that was the first status quo scenario. The second scenario, where we really focused on smart growth and smart planning principles, we were actually able to save much more land and still accommodate the same exact amount of housing as in the status quo over that 30-year period. And we did that by densifying certain areas, doing infill development, and promoting mixed use here on Aquidneck Island. Because the reality is we do need housing. We're in a housing crisis right now, I think that most of us feel. But our analysis showed that we can protect land on Aquidneck Island and really save a lot of the important open space and also have new development. The two things are not mutually exclusive. Because really, we can do both if we develop smartly. We can have a future that accommodates new housing and development and then protects the places for watershed protection for our local economy and for our overall community well-being. This future scenario that we strive for also has new and existing developments connected to public transit and having safe access and connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists, which are some of the topics that we'll hear about tonight. So because of this study and really the reality that land use planning will have a major impact on the future of Aquidneck Island, last year we held a series of workshops with Grow Smart on Citizen Planning 101. And really the purpose of that was to help folks understand how the development process unfolds here in Rhode Island and how they can get involved and effectively weigh in on projects. And this year, this is the first, as Scott mentioned, of a great slate of 3 workshops. The first tonight on transportation. Next week will be at Innovate Newport, and the focus will be on housing. It'll be next Thursday, 5:30 to 7:30. And then June 8th, we'll have same time, 5:30 to 7:30 at Common Fence Point in Portsmouth, and that'll focus on conservation topics. So each of these workshops will have the same structure with planners from the municipalities talking, as well as experts. And you can find more about those on either of our websites and also how to register as well. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Scott, and I'm looking forward to learning with everyone tonight.
So I just want to tee up what's going to happen tonight a little bit more and then get into the meat of the matter. Our goal tonight is to assess how to create a more user-friendly, more integrated, and more environmentally sound transportation system for Aquidneck Island. One that will facilitate more well-designed multifamily housing development and convenient, walkable, bikeable neighborhoods. And I think we assume that the kinds of transportation options provided to people on this island and the locations and routes for these different transportation options can significantly influence the location, the type, and the level of sustainability of development on the island. If we have more transit and less highway widening, we're going to get a different kind of development than if we have more highway widening and no expanded transit, for example. We want to examine this evening current transportation policies and proposed projects, possible transportation improvements for the future, and how we can actually achieve them. As far as the specific presentations, we're going to start in just a few minutes with updates from the 3 municipalities about what's going on regarding transportation projects, policies, and visions in each of their communities. And those updates are going to be provided, I believe, by Ron Wolanski, Middletown's Director of Planning and Economic Development. Is Ron here? Yep, there's Ron. Hi. Thule Martin, Newport City Planner. Is Thule also here? Yeah, great. And then one of two folks, according to my notes from Portsmouth, I got to put on my glasses, sorry. Either Len Hitchin, Portsmouth Town Planner. Is Len here? Did I butcher your name? No, Len's not here. So the other option is Aaron Lindo, Assistant Town Planner for Portsmouth. Is he here? Or are we going to have to improvise on Portsmouth? What do you think, Jillian? We're going to improvise on Portsmouth, huh? Okay. After the municipal updates, we're going to hear from a longtime GrowSmart partner and advisor, Sarah Engel, who's RIPTA's Director of Long Range Planning. And she's going to focus on, I think, a very important guide for Rhode Island's transportation future. It's called the State's Transit Master Plan. It was adopted several years ago, and we've been pushing for accelerated implementation of its ambitious, but I think important and essential agenda. And I think Sarah's going to spend some special time talking about the mobility hub concept, which is particularly relevant to Aquidneck Island. That's part of the TMP, as we call it. Then we're going to hear from someone I just know faintly. I've only worked with him for 20 years, and that's our transportation policy guru and our deputy director, John Flaherty. And he's going to give us all a briefing on the concept of something called transit-oriented development and some thoughts about the local potential for that, especially to stimulate more sound multifamily housing development and more mixed-use walkable development. And then John's going to be joined by our exceptional community partner, Barry Freeman. I think she's going to be joining us virtually. Is that right, John?
I'm going to be pitching for Barry because
she's got COVID. Okay. So you're going to hear more from John in that next segment, and he's going to be outlining some of the key aspects of the Aquidneck Island Bike Mobility Plan and how it ties into the state's recently enacted statewide bike mobility plan. Then we'll have some time for questions and discussion involving all of you, hopefully. And we're going to wrap it up with Jillian Finkel, our dynamic director of special projects at GrowSmart Rhode Island, talking about how you folks can make some of the hopefully exciting concepts and policy proposals you hear about tonight, how you can make them real, how you can get them actually implemented by your local leaders through advocacy and public engagement. So let's turn to our municipal staff for their transportation overview and plans. And Jillian, is each municipal rep going to come up here and do their spiel? So I guess I'd invite Ron as the host community to start from Middletown. Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks. No, it's just spiel. Don't worry about it. Yeah. I'm Ron Wolanski. I'm the planning director here in Middletown, and I was asked, and the three of us, the three municipal planners, were asked to give a bit of an overview on projects that have been going on, things that have happened recently, projects that might be planned for the future, hopefully the near future. So I've got a bit of a laundry list. I'll go through it and can answer any questions that might come up about any particular item. So when we talk about transportation here in Middletown, the conversation usually revolves around East Main Road and West Main Road. Those obviously are the two main transportation corridors on the island and through Middletown. And when folks are talking about transportation, that's a lot of times what first comes to mind. As part of that conversation, oftentimes Burma Road, Defense Highway will come up as well. The town of Middletown and town of Portsmouth have been working over the past many years in discussion with the Navy and Rhode Island DOT about the options for perhaps capitalizing more on the opportunities that Burma Road offers to take some of the pressure off of East Main Road and West Main Road in terms of traffic volumes. I think those of us who are on the roads on this island know that it doesn't take much to gum up the works. When there's a time when the Navy, for example, has to shut down Burma Road for maintenance activities, there's an immediate impact felt, primarily on West Main Road. So the three roadways are really connected in the way they operate in serving the island. So those are ongoing conversations about how to best capitalize on those assets. Another topic of interest in Middletown is certainly seasonal traffic, beach traffic, which does impact local roads as well. Paradise Avenue is an area of discussion where it receives a lot of pressure from beach traffic during the summertime. The town has undertaken over the past few years traffic calming activities on several roads in town, including Forest Avenue, Chases Lane, and also on Paradise Avenue, trying to slow traffic down and make those roadways safer for all that use those roads, bikes and peds as well. And on that note, the town has an increasing interest in bicycle and pedestrian mobility and safety within the town. Several years ago, the town did adopt a complete streets resolution that was recently revisited, and I guess capital are built upon by adopting an ordinance, which will also, with work going on roads in town, improve opportunities for bike and pedestrian improvements on those roadways. And of course, any new roadways that are built, not that we see a lot of new roadway being built in town, would have to comply with those concepts for providing bike and pedestrian facilities. But it's really the reconstruction of roadways where you're going to see that benefit. The town council has created a bike and pedestrian advisory committee, thanks to our council member, Emily, who really advocated for that. So there's going to be a lot more activity, a lot of discussion. That group will be working with the other town committees, but also really serving as an advocate at the town council level for some of these ideas to get implemented. The town is, and you're going to hear a lot more about this later, but the town is participating in the Ride Island effort, which is a bike and pedestrian safety and facilities discussion going on the island. We're also going to be applying this grant round for a Safe Streets for All grant for an action plan for the town, which for those that might not be familiar, that having that action plan in place will make us better able to apply for implementation funding for various projects. Looking at development and how development impacts and potentially can improve traffic and transportation issues, the town did adopt a mixed-use development ordinance a little while back. We are seeing some of that, some developments taking advantage of that ordinance. What that really did in a nutshell is it allowed for multifamily residential development to be incorporated into commercial properties. So we've had a couple of, I'll call them retrofits of some commercial properties where some multifamily residential has been introduced. And we've also got the town's own Middletown Center project that I'm sure many of you have heard about at the corner of West Main Road and Connington Highway, 15 acres of town-owned land that are proposed for mixed-use development, which would include residential, retail, and also a hotel. So the idea, again, we'll talk about later, transit-oriented development. That project fits right in with that concept. It's right on West Main Road, right on a couple of different RIPTA lines. We have two main RIPTA lines in town, the 60th line, which serves the island from Providence, and then 63, which is sort of the island route that serves Newport and Middletown shopping areas. In terms of specific roadway and other transportation projects, recent and ongoing projects, of course, there's the Pell Bridge realignment, and part of that project included the shared use path on Connington Highway and Connell Highway, which gets right up to West Main Road. So that is in place now. We have Upper Aquidneck Avenue being reconstructed at this very moment. That project includes the installation of a sidewalk on the west side of Aquidneck Avenue, and it will also include bike lanes on both sides of the road. Purgatory Road, which is a roadway down in the southern part of town that connects from First Beach over to Second Beach. We've got funding to reconstruct that roadway, which will also include a sidewalk where there is no sidewalk now, connecting again from the Atlantic Beach District, First Beach area, all the way over to Second Beach. And the reconstruction will also include 4-foot wide shoulders on each side of the road. And we're looking for construction on that to start in fall of 2024. Within the State Transportation Improvement Program, we've got a few other projects that are bicycle and pedestrian related. East Main Shared Use Path, which would be a shared use path outside of the roadway from in Portsmouth all the way down into Middletown, terminating at Aquidneck Avenue, where it would, meet up with the work that's being done on Aquidneck Avenue right now. That project is out in the out years at this point, but we're looking for Rhode Island DOT to move that up. If not the entire project, at least a segment of the project that would allow us to connect from the Oliphant Lane, Mitchell's Lane area to get people from, again, that area over to Mitchell's Lane and be able to bike in the more rural parts of town. Another project is Lower Aquidneck Avenue. That's coming. It's an existing TIP project. It's coming in a couple of years, probably resurfacing and also improvements to sidewalks and ramps on that section of Aquidneck Avenue. Future projects, we're looking at Lower Aquidneck Avenue Streetscapes project, which will include improvements within the Atlantic Beach Business District, widening sidewalks, and providing pedestrian improvements. Another project the town has in the works is a roundabout installation at the intersection of Berkeley and Paradise Avenue and Green End Avenue. That's currently under discussion and design. No time frame yet on when that would be constructed. And then also the work of the advisory committee, the Bike Ped Advisory Committee. They're looking at an east-west bicycle connection in the Green Lane Oliphant area, as I just mentioned, with the idea of the East Main Road multi-use path. This would be an east-west route, basically from Burma Road up Green Lane, somehow getting across ultimately to East Main Road, hopefully linking up with that multi-use path and getting to Mitchell's Lane. So basically you'd be able to ride or walk from one coast to the other. So those are projects, again, a little bit further down the line, but we're looking forward to those. So that's all I have for now. Yeah.
Ron, that was a lot. Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Martin, Newport City Planner. It's also an exciting time to be a planner in Newport. There's a lot going on. There are two main projects. One is the state's DOT Pell Bridge realignment, ramp realignment project. It's been going on for a while, but they're making rapid progress and it will still continue for another year or so. With that, there's going to be roadway geometry is going to be simplified quite significantly. Approximately 25 acres of land will be opened up thanks to that change. There'll be great pedestrian and bike improvements, and the multi-use path that Ron mentioned in Middletown in Newport will continue from Middletown border all the way to the Gateway Center in downtown Newport. So a wonderful amenity for a multimodal transportation network in Newport. Second, just 3 weeks ago, the Newport City Council approved our city's transportation master plan called Keep Newport Moving. So over the past 2 years, there's been robust community engagement. So we know very well what are some of the challenges, what are the things that community members see challenging or less than desirable happening in Newport. As you can imagine, Ron also mentioned the seasonal traffic. It's the same, it's the traffic stress, sitting in congestion, looking for parking, things of that nature, narrow sidewalks. And we also, thanks to that process, know very well what the community members think we could build upon and what we could introduce in Newport to make the transportation network better. And one thing, we're already very walkable, but the sidewalks in some places are narrow or inconsistent. We could prove on that. And second, water transportation holds a great cultural boating tradition is already there. We have water taxis and ferries operating, but we could probably do even more and really bring people to Newport via boats and also get them around to different parts of the city. We also heard that there's a great desire for just generally multimodal transportation. Let's give people options. If you do have to arrive by vehicle, maybe you could park once and then use the great sidewalk, bicycle network, water taxis, maybe scooters, bike share, car share, things of that nature to get around throughout the day. Get to the beach, get to your shopping, your dining areas. I think that bodes really well with our topics tonight, that multimodal transportation, supporting the multiple options that can be there that maybe today are not very strong. So thanks to the community support and thanks to the council support, our department can now look for, with community partners, of course, look for funding and make the plan recommendations, the transportation master plan recommendations into reality. Integrating technology, integrating all the good ideas that came from community members, from our consultant and partners. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Is anyone, I don't think anyone has arrived from Portsmouth from the planning department. No, guess not. Okay, well, we're going to have to, I guess, hear from them some other time, maybe in this series. So now it's my pleasure to invite Sarah Engel from RIPTA to tell us about the really exciting visionary transit master plan and what might be most relevant about it to Aquidneck Island. So thanks, Sarah.
And we have some slides that I think Jillian's going to bring up. While she's doing that, I actually wanted to mention something that is not in the presentation, so don't need a slide for it. But Ron actually made me remember the state of Rhode Island through RIPTA has been awarded from US DOT and the Federal Highway Administration $5 million to do some safe streets and roads action planning. And so RIPTA is going to be sort of helping to facilitate that process over the next year, probably year and a half, year to year and a half. The funds are not quite ready to start flowing yet, but we're really pleased to be a part of that planning process. It's going to be about complete streets, about Vision Zero, which is US DOT's vision for literally zero deaths on roadways across America, which is incredibly ambitious, but incredibly important. So that's not going to be a transit specific planning effort. That's going to be a bicycle, pedestrian, all roadway users, including people in their cars, just how to make the transportation network overall safer. And that is very true for folks who use transit as well. You start as a pedestrian or as a cyclist or on your scooter, and you get on the bus, and then you get off and probably walk to your destination at the end of your trip as well. So we want to be a part of the process at all those levels if we can be helpful in any way. So just announcing that that's going to be getting underway within the next couple months. And so here's Newport, the mobility hub down in Newport that probably most of you have seen or passed through at some point or other. I don't know if that's sunrise or sunset, but I am really enthusiastic about the idea of seeing the sun again if it ever decides to stop raining and misting on us. Okay, next slide. So in a nutshell, Transit Forward RI 2040 is Rhode Island's first ever statewide transit master plan. It is a part of our state's guide plan adopted by State Planning Council in December of 2020. The planning process took place between 2018 and 2020, including a public meeting in this very space that I remember almost like it was yesterday. The plan focuses on 5 key initiatives for better transit across the state of Rhode Island. First one is to improve existing transit services, which mostly means more frequent transit, greater span of service, more evening, early morning, weekend transit service to make it more useful to everyone, especially if you want to go to work and you happen to work in the evening. It doesn't help if the service stops at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Expanding service to new areas, which we have a slide coming up where we'll talk about that a little bit right down here in Aquidneck. Developing high capacity transit, that's going to be focused principally in the Providence metro area, but there are some regional high capacity transit services as well that are proposed. Improving access to transit. Again, that's where I was just talking about bicycle and pedestrian access. And we have some things in the plan for Aquidneck on that front. And making transit easier to use. So we already have real-time information available on your smartphone. If you're a smartphone user, you can see when the next bus is coming to your bus stop. But that's kind of just the beginning for that. So there are also recommendations around that in the plan. And if you go to ripta.com and search for Transit Forward RI, you can see the whole plan and a whole suite of documents that are related to it, including the maps that show you what improvements are slated for where around the state. Next slide. It's coming. Jillian, you have an adorable dog and a beautiful family. It just doesn't want to go. I'm going to start speaking to this slide anyway, because I have my notes in front of me. And I actually am going to take this opportunity to say that the Sasaki plan for Aquidneck Island with the scenarios is, I think, a beautiful, before I became a transit planner, I was the land use and just community planning generalist. And so I always love when you look out into the future and say, we can either continue developing as we are today, or we can make some changes, and here's what we can accomplish if we make a few simple changes. And that plan really blew me away, because not only the amount of land that could be conserved if we just slightly adjust the way we do development on the island, but also the environmental impacts to, runoff and the chemicals in the soil and the ability to support wildlife. The benefits are really, really impressive. So I love the planning effort, and I really am glad that folks are embracing it. So side by side, these are clearly not at the same scale is the image of existing land use on the island now, and a little snapshot from the transit master plan that sort of shows how Aquidneck Island connects to the east over to Tiverton and Little Compton, and to the west across towards Narragansett and North and South Kingstown. And I kind of specifically want to point out, so obviously the lines for the most part that you see on the map, the dark lines are fixed route bus services. And then there's some sort of peachy colored blobs. Those are flex zones. And if you're traveling within a flex zone, you can actually schedule a pickup to and from any location within that zone today. You don't have to have any special qualification to do it. You just have to call the right phone number and we can get that for you. And you can travel within that zone for the same $2 that you travel on a fixed route, except you actually get picked up door to door. So that's kind of an sort of unsung feature of the transit system in Rhode Island that is available right here in Newport and Middletown. Doesn't cover the entirety of both of the municipalities, but a pretty good swath. And then the red and the blue squares are mobility hubs. The red square in Newport is the existing Newport Visitor Center hub that was pictured on the front on the title slide. The blue ones do not exist, but what the Transit Master Plan proposes is that every community in Rhode Island, somewhere, not necessarily at those exact locations, but somewhere in every town or village or region of the state, if it is desired, should have a place where you can have intermodal transit resources coming together, or transportation resources. It's another slide coming up. We'll talk more about that. But those, I just wanted to mention those three elements that are all shown here on this big picture. Next slide. So starting with fixed route services, lines on the map, not the blobs or the squares. These are the existing routes that serve Newport, Middletown, and Portsmouth. And the Transit Master Plan proposes improvements in frequency and span of service to all of them. And we just basically put the frequency improvements. So as an example, Route 60, the regional route that runs all the way up East Bay between Newport and Providence, currently operates every 30 minutes, would operate every 15 minutes with over the next 10 to 20 years, assuming that resources are available 7 days a week, all day. 64, similarly doubling in the number of buses coming to each bus stop all day. Route 6, I'm just going to kind of skip down to Route 68. Route 68, when this plan was adopted, did not exist. It was proposed that it become a new route, and then it did become a new route. It was something that we were able to introduce a year ago, and it's been really, really successful. Thanks to an incredible partnership with Discover Newport. Last summer, transit travel was free on Route 68 and Route 67. We're going to be able to offer that again this summer. And we love partnerships. We love partnering with towns and cities, and especially not only, but definitely if they're, and cities, towns, and organizations. Especially if there's resources that we can sort of partner up. So providing a free transit route is not something that RIPT is able to do out of its general funds, but when a sponsor comes along, it's pretty incredible. That was so successful last year. And we're really glad to be able to do it again next year. So 24L and 61, these are our express services. COVID was really rough on commuter express type travel in general. For a long time, everyone was home, and then for a long time, many people were working from home. Express bus commuters are some of the last to really be coming back in a big way to transit, but the 61 is doing really well. It serves The park and rides, it originates in Tiverton and it serves the park and ride up at the top of Portsmouth before going on up to Providence. The 24L is relatively new in the last couple of years and actually stops over it runs from Newport to Fall River. So it's great. We actually get to go out of the state. If you were to zoom out on a map and see how Fall River sort of sits within the region, it's right kind of in the center of our population. It just happens that there's a state line there. So to be able to make that connection to Fall River and then back up to Providence is fantastic. It's done really, really well. The transit master plan calls for doubling the number of trips on the 24L. And quite honestly, our service planners right now are thinking about just making it an all-day service. So we'll see where that goes, but it's done really well so far. Next slide. And maybe we'll get to look at the dog again because the dog is super cute. And the curly haired girl is friends with my daughter. Actually, they're adorable. They go on they make up scavenger hunts and do all sorts of fun things. But the next slide is going to be looking at Flex Service, which is the sort of peach colored blobs on the map. And basically what I want to say about them is that within the next, we're getting ready to pilot. Well, this is a nice slide too. It makes me want to walk in the sunshine again. As I mentioned, currently within a flex zone, you can schedule a trip door to door from any destination. You don't have to live in the zone. You just have to be traveling within the zone. And so here's the Newport Middletown flex zone. We are getting ready to pilot this year, hopefully this summer, if not sooner, in the West Warwick flex zone. And if it's successful, and we certainly expect it to be, we'll roll it out across the state. The ability to do real-time on-demand hailing of your flex trip. So you don't have to call the day before. Instead, you're able to use the app on it, basically as if you were scheduling an Uber or a Lyft trip. Full disclosure, it probably won't be 10 minutes. It might be more like 20 minutes to half an hour, but really to be able to schedule your trip in pretty much just as simple a way on the same day, we hope is going to really get this service up to the level that we've been wanting it to be for quite a long time. And it's going to be really fun to give it a try. So hopefully we can do that soon down here in Newport and Middletown, and stay tuned for updates on how it's going in West Warwick as we proceed with that. Next slide. And that's going to be mobility hubs, which I've already talked a little bit about, just the idea that the mobility hub that we know that's in downtown Newport right now is for those of you that sort of use it or meet friends there, or people coming in from out of town. You have the local tour buses that stop there. You also have RIPTA buses that stop there. In a mobility hub, and this is like a concept that is a little further along in Europe, but it's really gaining a lot of traction here. And it's just sort of a common sense thing that if you co-locate what's a new mobility hub that people are, and sorry, this is like a northern part of the state thing, and I shouldn't use this example, but the Pawtucket Central Falls train station, the MBTA now stops, many times a day at the border of Pawtucket and Central Falls, and RIPTA buses come in there and people make those transfers. They used to drive all the way to South Attleboro to do it, but now we get to do it right here in our state. And it has been incredible. Ridership is really, really good. And that essentially is a mobility hub. So what you could do in Portsmouth or Middletown at a much smaller scale, you're not necessarily going to have a train station, but if you have a senior center, if you have town municipal van services, you can actually schedule the trips so that they would coincide with a bus, the regional bus, if people need to go up to Providence, or if they want to go west to Kingston Station, get a train and go, into New York City. it can be a place where you can make those transfers. You also can do things like put bike share stations there. You can put Amazon lockers there. You can have a bike repair facility there. You would definitely have real-time arrival signage so that you can see when all these things are happening, without having to, call RIPTA customer service because it's right there for you. There has to be like a little coffee kiosk because, I don't know, if you're me, you need coffee often. And I think a lot of people like that amenity, but it can really be whatever the community wants it to be. And it can be as small as a little corner of a parking lot at a grocery store at the right kind of key intersection. It doesn't have to be, anything fancy or very big. Next slide. And I think there's only just a couple more, and these are the sobering, how much is all of this going to cost and where is the money going to come from? And the numbers that I'm going to show you right now are 20-year numbers for the whole state, for the whole transit master plan, including bus rapid transit and or light rail up in the Providence metro area. So for the things that I was just talking about that could happen here locally, it's really, don't worry about these numbers. It's much less scary. And what RIPTA loves to do as we're able is to just find efficiencies. We have been implementing the transit master plan for 2 years now, basically by improving weekend service and evening service with existing vehicles, instead of bringing the vehicle home to the bus garage and letting it sit all weekend, to the extent that we're able to get an extra driver or two to go out and provide that service on the weekend. We have the vehicles. We do reach the point eventually where you have to have more vehicles to provide more service. Doubling the frequency of service on a route from 1 hour to half an hour takes more drivers and more buses. And to fund the whole plan across the state is effectively would double RIPTA's operating budget. Our operating budget is mostly personnel, so salaries and benefits. It's also fuel, however the vehicles are powered. Currently mostly diesel and diesel hybrid, but in the future there'll be more and more electric, possibly even at some point some hydrogen fuel cell. That is all unfolding slowly as well. It's a whole different presentation, but it would be ultimately a large increase in operating costs. The upside of that is they're really good paying jobs. They carry great benefits. We are hiring if anyone knows someone who would like to be an operator. We're a great employer. And so it's a boost for the state's economy. We put people to work. Plus we offer better, transit service for Rhode Islanders. On the capital side, depending on, and this is largely a lot of investment of building 1 or 2 light rail lines or bus rapid transit lines in the Providence metro area, a $2 to $3 billion investment over 20 years, most of that coming at the end out towards 17, 18, 19, 20 years. If you break that out, split that out over 20 years, it's about $100 to $150, $160 million a year. It's a big reach. A lot of that capital cost actually can be funded through federal grants, both through the Federal Transit Administration formula funds and through their discretionary programs and US DOT programs like REAS. And so honestly, even though the capital numbers are really, really large, our state General Assembly does an incredible job of providing match funds. There always has to be a local match. They've never not come through when a federal grant application is successful. So actually one more slide and then I think we're done. And this is what I'm about to say is that in terms of where the funding comes from for RIPTA, federal funding is the biggest slice. It does fund most of the on average, 80% of the capital investments, the bricks and mortar stuff. And very good track record with that. And then the state gas tax is the primary source for operating that covers all of the salaries and the benefits and the fuel and keeping the buses maintained and out on the road. And that has been a really reliable source as well. The only trick with that is that, you know, as the state moves towards more electrification of transportation generally, as people buy, you know, hybrid vehicles, their Priuses and their Teslas, gas tax is going to go down. So there is an effort now to really think about what's the future of transportation funding generally. So if you are interested in that sort of world and getting involved in advocacy, just it's something to think about, read up on and be talking to your local friends and lawmakers about what the answers are on that. It's not easy stuff. And then the third one, in terms of the third and fourth kind of go together in terms of key funding sources, are fare box revenue, which is by far not the biggest slice of pie. It's quite a small slice for RIPTA, but it's also a crucial one. We charge $2 anywhere in the state. You can go from one end of the state to the other. If you are using a Wave account-based pass and you ride on a regular basis, you will max out at $70 over the course of a month, and then you travel for free for the rest of the month. So it's a pretty good deal. We do offer special fare subsidies for folks who are in need, for seniors, individuals with disabilities who are low income. You can travel for free on the system. And it's so the last piece is the third party fares, which is not paid by an individual at the fare box, but we have partnerships with universities and colleges across the state and with businesses, hospitals, Hasbro, large employers who actually will contract with RIPTA to offer fare subsidies to their employees, which is fantastic. It helps people get to work. That program used to be called EcoPass. Now it's called Wave to Work, because Wave is the new fare system. And that actually brings 14, close to $15 million a year of revenue to RIPTA. So that's kind of just the picture of that. The last slide, I won't, you can do, oh, look at that, is the thank you slide. So thank you for your time and your attention and your support of RIPTA.
I think at Grow Smart Rhode Island, we kind of feel as though RIPTA is like Rodney Dangerfield. It's just the agency that keeps plugging along but doesn't get much respect. So they are underrated, undervalued. We've got a little extra time. Is that still the case, John? Okay. So, and we've been talking at you a lot. So we thought before we talked at you some more, that we'd open it up for questions, comments from anybody. So who would like, yes. And well, if you don't mind telling us your name and your town or affiliation, that could be helpful.
My name is Melissa Desjardins.
And by the way, there's other people here who may end up answering your question because they're probably
Yeah,
better versed
sure.
than I am on some of these things.
So I'm involved in the Portsmouth Senior Center project in town. And I just had a question if RIPTA has any funding to help. You mentioned the mobility hub, that maybe that's a great, like a senior center is a great place since we're only in schematic design. There's an opportunity to look at how the circulation pattern is operating, because it's also going to be affordable senior housing. I feel like this isn't working.
I guess so.
So yeah, I love that question. It's we don't necessarily have a particular set aside of funding to do that, but to the extent that our staff planners are on staff for the purpose of planning, we are always available to sort of sit down and at least start those conversations. And then when it comes time to actually design, engineer, and build a project, we love to fundraise. So there's grant programs out there that we can sort of pursue once the concept is in place. We have a planner who specifically just focuses on coordination with towns and community organizations, and looks at human services, transportation coordination, and and our service planning team is also available. So starting the conversation is easy. And then once it's time to actually go after the money, we can do that as well. Does that sort of answer the question? Yeah. Yeah, it depends. Because if it's, and I'm just sort of making this up as I go. So if you're trying to picture an actual place, probably not a good idea. But let's say there's a bus route on a main corridor that has mixed use development sort of on both sides. And, maybe there's the library and then there's a grocery store or a shopping plaza. Sometimes in situations like that, we have a bus stop interior to the plaza, and we'll actually pull up in front of the Stop and Shop, let's just say. Other times we have a bus stop that's kind of on the street out front. It just depends. But if at that same intersection there is, the library or the senior center or the recreation complex, and plus the retail or the other services, it really could be. It depends on the landowners, right? Because RIPTA doesn't own property. The communities own the right of way, but that's usually restricted. So you kind of have to have like a willing partner to dedicate some space, but it could be that the stop kind of remains on street, but that sort of could be an easement where, the community van comes in, 3 times a day or, twice in the morning and twice in the afternoon, and they just sort of hook up. There could be like a shelter with, the bike share stations. I'm trying to think how the bike share works here, because I'm more familiar with, if in Providence now, it's like everywhere you go, there's like a bike share station. I really need to spend more time in Newport, but it's possible. It really takes sort of sitting down and looking at the map and the specifics, because, me making up a scenario probably isn't the greatest answer either, but there's often a way. We just actually extended our park and ride service, reintroduced into Foster up in the northwest part of the state. There had been park and ride in Foster for many years. And then the organization that was hosting it said, we don't want rivers coming in anymore. And so Foster suddenly didn't have a park and ride lot. Well, the town just created one. There was a town parking lot, and they were like, we want the bus to come here, and so that we can have park and ride service in Foster again. And they, sent Public Works out, and they did it. And so now Foster has bus service again. And it was remarkable how easy it was after many years of thinking like, how unfortunate is it that Foster doesn't have. So I think it starts with a conversation, with the planners and the interested parties.
You can stay up there. I was really interested to see that about the bus transportation from Newport into Fall River and that happening more often. What is the status, if you know, of the MBTA coming further south? Because to me, that would be an amazing connection. One of the former people who did that.
Yeah, so I don't know the details of it. I know it is moving forward. And I know that our service planners, including we have one of the people on our service planning team actually lives in Boston and commutes in every day. He sort of switches between Amtrak and the T, which is one of the nice things. Actually, someday, we're not there yet, but someday you're going to be able to just ride either of them on the same. There's going to be what do they call it? Like a sharing sort of system where you can ride either service and RIPTA all on your same wave or whichever the fare system is. We are, when the time comes, and again, I don't know the exact timeline, except that it's going to happen, the rail, we're going to align our schedules so that to the extent possible, you can make the transfers readily. between, the RIPTA service and the MBTA service, to try to maximize the ease of use of that. They're definitely thinking about it, and we have some folks on staff who are like really like rail transit geeks who follow this stuff very, very closely. So unfortunately, I'm not the one to know the details, but it's going to happen. Yeah.
What you were thinking of too is an extension of that rail line over on Island down to. That's by the bridge.
Sarah, for a wonderful presentation. I must admit, I didn't know much about the Flexer. Have any demographics information about the service and use it?
That is a great question. In general, I think it skews, it probably skews sort of 50 and ages 50 and up. It tends to be, we market it to everyone, but I think we market it most to folks who are considering giving up the keys, or who a lot of the outreach we do, we sort of will combine forces between, so we have a commuter resource team who goes out to talk to folks about van pooling and how you get to work if you work at a business park that is not really on a fixed route, on the fixed route bus network. And so we do matchmaking there. So it's like Quonset Business Park is a good example. Folks work on weird shift times. So we have our commuter resource team that does that. We also have our customer service folks who will go out on the road primarily to senior centers to talk about our bus pass programs, where if you're a senior and you have a lower income, you can ride for either half fare or free. And so customer service folks will go out and sort of help you sign up for a bus pass so that you can do that. And those tend to be sort of great times to also talk about if there's a flex zone in that area. We will definitely sort of promote the flex zone. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I think the having to sign up for it a day in advance. I mean, most people like don't wake up and think tomorrow I want to go to the grocery store at 2 p.m. Folks also are sometimes a little bit nervous that, if they go to the grocery store for the return trip, they might have to wait around for a while and your ice cream's going to melt, and that's no good. So you might rather just catch a ride with someone and to use your car. Like it's not, transit is not as easy as the thing that you have direct control over. And so as long as parking is plentiful and free, or close to free as it is in most places around the state, folks are going to use a car if they can, for the most part. So that's part of why we're really trying to make it a little easier to do like a same day, I want to go somewhere like in an hour, can I book that trip now and go, get picked up in half an hour and go. So we'll see. There was a conversation, we did a social media promotion I think it was last summer, and the conversation on Facebook was fantastic around Flex. And we ended up with a lot of people who use Flex, explaining to other people how it works and sort of that, I think it's just, I think among people who use it, it's a great thing. And I think there's some dedicated folks who do, but it's a small slice.
Hi, so what is the process?
We cross your fingers. We've actually applied for a $25 million grant. We don't hear until the end of next month, but by the end of the next month, we should know whether we get some, all, or none. So if we get that funding, it will get us a long ways towards improve it. So we have 34 roughly 100 bus stops across the state. And approximately 300 or so, maybe less than 300 shelters in the state. And I'm looking at Julia behind you because she's kind of maintained our inventory. And, you know, most of those shelters are not in great condition. And a lot of bus stops are on streets that either don't have sidewalks at all, or the sidewalk is not in great condition or is not ADA accessible. So there's a lot of partnering with municipalities that we have to do, but there's also a lot that we can just do directly. One of the things that we're working on right now is just signage. So instead of just having the bus stop sign that is a picture of a bus, we're going to have signs that are going to show you, and this is also a transit master plan recommendation, what routes are served at that, you know, what buses stop at that bus stop, and they're going to be color coded. So if it's a frequent service, it'll be one color. And if it only is a less frequent service, it'll be another color. It'll have a QR code so that you can then sort of zap, if you're a smartphone user, to the real-time information for those routes, and to the overall sort of schedule of services. We're hoping to be able to also have some built-in, for folks who are visually impaired, that have apps on their phones that are audio related, that can almost, with like a sonar type technology, like tell you, you know, that you're approaching a bus stop that is served by the following routes. So, and we are going to start, whether or not we get the grant that we've applied for, we're in the process of setting up our budget right now for next year. And we're hoping to be able to budget $1 million a year for the next 10 years. So starting with the most urgently needed bus stop improvements, and just kind of working our way through, you know, we'll do it little by little if that's how we have to do it. And if we get some serious funding, we'll scale up, and hire a manager and you know, make it happen faster. We are sadly well aware that the, you know, quality of bus stops is lacking, and that's really important amenity. So we are actively, we think about it every day.
Resident of Middletown, and I commute to Providence. I am an active user of Route 60 that I love. I love RIPTA. I kind of have two questions that both follow Route 60. One is I only started using the bus back in like fall of last year, and it was back when we had enough drivers to have more frequent service. I want to ask one, because I can't find it anywhere on the website, like how that's coming along, recruiting more drivers, and like how soon maybe we could get back to frequent service.
Yeah.
And then my second question was, I know that even when we have frequent service, there's the idea that 60 runs every 15 minutes, but for the island itself, it's more like every 30 because it goes West Main or East Main and it goes back and forth. If there's any push to like make that more cohesive for both sides to be
I think that's a goal, taking the second question first. Not something that we're able to sort of push on now, but I know that ultimately that would be, I think, in the sort of doubling of the frequency of that service, it would have effectively be able to accomplish that. Hiring is coming along. I know that we have I think it's an on-site job fair next week or week after next. Our HR folks are actually pretty exhausted, but they are diligently both going out to job fairs outside of RIPTA and hosting on site, and sort of doing some broader recruitment efforts, building partnerships with training, training. We have this issue also with mechanics. So we're working on, mechanic training partnerships and things like that. It's definitely not just a local issue. It's really like everywhere. We have increased our starting salaries, and that has definitely gotten some interest. So it's a little bit of a slow process, and I think we're going to continue looking at that. And if we have to, think about possibly doing some further incentives, I think everything's on the table. So unfortunately, I can't say, by the fall shoes up, we're going to be ready to reintroduce the service levels, but hopefully, yeah.
Emily, I'm one of the town council. To add on to what Emily had asked about bus stops, you mentioned if grants or some or all of it that will sort of ups, but say you only get some of the money or none of the money, maybe you don't know the answer to this, but I'm curious, maybe this is a better question for but what is the scope or role of the municipality? I'm kind of still learning on this side. Like, what can we do? Like, perhaps and put bus shelters, bench, like. Project to put some benches, for example, next to the bus stop. Is that something that we're allowed to do, or is it?
I think so. I think there's a pretty long history sort of throughout the transit world, not just here in Rhode Island, but in general of municipalities being involved in and partnering around bus stop amenities. And I think cities and towns play sort of an especially important role in terms of like the maintenance of them, just making sure that sidewalks are clear. And so I think to be partnering in general and sort of in a conversation is like a great starting point. There is a bus stop design guidebook where we have kind of specifications for like what a bus stop should, dimensions and whatnot. And we are, we're updating that now to sort of, because it's 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So we're kind of constantly, but in general, and that's available on our website. We are in the process of getting ready to issue an RFP for shelters and seating and amenities that we can actually have like a ready stock of them to deploy, which is not something that we've typically had available. I now that we're doing it, it's like, gosh, why do we not always have that? But we are going to have that going forward. And so where I was going with that is I think we could probably share those specifications so that you could sort of see. I do think there's something to be said for having generally consistency throughout the system. But if it's a town owned right of way, I don't think that we're in a position to stop the town from saying we want a higher level of amenity. So I think we would love to coordinate on that. And, I don't think that we would want to stand in the way of providing more and better passenger amenities for a particular community if the community wants to help make that happen.
Hi, my name is Peter Midgley, and I'm on the advisory committee for. As a sort of follow-up question on the shelters, the important thing is not just the shelter, but getting to it, crossing the road safely. How do you work with the local authority to happen and that funding purely? One question. Another, it's also linked. You haven't talked about sort of the service and the frequency and the reliability of your bus. Are they on schedule? They are. I'm not going to ask the next question, but I'm assuming they're not necessarily so. What about bus priority, traffic signals, lanes, etc., etc.? Obviously, I've seen this in Providence, but I haven't seen anything here. Do you need it? Okay.
It's coming to East and West Main Road.
Okay. And again, how do you interact with the local authorities here to achieve what you require? Thank you.
All right.
For a very good presentation.
Thank you. There was a lot in there. So just let me know if I miss anything, starting with transit signal priority. Yeah, so that's where if you have a signalized intersection, so right, red, yellow, green light, those signals can be enabled to interact with a bus or an emergency vehicle. And so often when you have, like the fire truck comes through and your light all of a sudden turns red, that often is because that signal is enabled with transit with signal priority that allows it to, and so you can adjust the length of the red or the whatever phase of the signal. And so in transit signal priority, the system is calibrated to give the bus a little bit of a jump and it helps, it does help with on-time performance of the bus, because if there's congestion, the bus will be stuck in the congestion with the rest of the vehicles. So we have been working on the island to install and activate transit signal priority on East and West Main Road. RIDOT has been a partner in that. And RIDOT actually, this tends to involve signals that are RIDOT owned signals. And so there's actually, you have to go through a permitting process with them, and that can be a little painful. I don't know, I feel like the words RIDOT and permitting kind of make me like a little, it's taking a lot longer than we wanted it to. And we have to do some before and after studies to make sure that we're not creating more congestion than we're alleviating. But it is happening, and I don't know the time frame of when, but I think it should be within the next 3 months. Zach Agish in our office is sort of the point for that, and James Canty, our director of project management. So they're probably cringing right now because I might be giving, not quite. But anyway, it's happening. RIDOT has been helpful, but also is the gatekeeper on a lot of that. So that's transit signal priority. Our on-time performance system-wide is pretty good. I mean, it's pretty much on par with, I think, transit, nationally. I think what happens is when the bus isn't running on schedule, and especially if it's running early, which is the thing that is the worst, because there's nothing like getting to the bus stop and realizing that you just missed the bus and that the next one's not coming for an hour. It's one thing if it's not there yet and you have to wait another 10 or 20 minutes, but the other way around is really, that's the cardinal sin. So I think when that happens, it tends to be loud and painful. And when we had the driver shortage sort of at the worst back in the fall, on-time performance felt absolutely horrible because the driver shortage was affecting that. I think we're doing okay. And we are always working on using data. The buses all are enabled. They have AVLs, so automated vehicle locators, being more data driven and really keeping an eye on the system so that we can constantly be refining our routing to match the reality of what the traffic looks like out there. You had another question about funding of stops. Yep. Are we winding up on time? Okay. Yeah. So I think on that, I think funding, sort of partnering, is probably ultimately the answer. We definitely are generally responsible for the funding of the passenger amenities. If we win the RAISE grant with the $25 million ask, we would definitely use some of that to actually pay some of those broader accessibility improvements as well. I do know that funding in general is not readily available for right-of-way improvements in cities and towns around the state. And I know that statewide planning has not done a solicitation for new projects to go into the STIP in several years. And that is often where those kind of funds come from for complete streets improvements and that sort of thing. So we are also, though, have been in discussion with RIDOT and statewide planning for some years now, is the idea of bundling projects. So, and I think through the Safe Streets for All planning process, what hopefully can happen is cities and towns and RIDOT and RIPTA and statewide planning can kind of all come together and identify, here are the key intersections and corridors that need attention, that need sidewalks, that need intersection improvements, and sort of all target our funding to meet those priority locations and actually get something done, instead of, tearing up the street and then 2 years later tearing it up again for something else. And then, oh, we forgot to do the bus stop improvements and having to do that, like, to really actually just coordinate. We're a small state, we're 3 agencies, we should be able to do this. And that's the goal. So sort of fingers crossed that we can deliver on that going forward. You know, any town or city that wants to have a conversation about that, we're happy to be involved. And it is really limited resources. So, you know, to the extent that we can help bring additional resources to the picture, we're happy to help work on that.
Got encyclopedic knowledge of our bus system, transit system. Sarah, is there, because there's so much interest in finding out what RIPTA can and cannot do on all these issues, is there a point of contact, an email point of contact, a phone point of contact for people? Okay. And what about municipalities? How do they interact with RIPTA? Do they do that, or do they have some liaison they can talk to who's higher up in the food chain? Well, you're very popular, so that's obviously. Okay.
So.
Oh.
It's on? So Ingle, INGLE @ ripta.com.
It's easy. Okay,
If I don't have the answer, I can find someone who does.
wonderful. Thanks. All right, on to my colleague and advocate extraordinaire, John Flaherty, who's going to talk about TOD and also about bike mobility plan. And in the discussion about funding of RIPTA, I just want to, and John, I'm sure is going to reiterate this, but one of Grow Smart Rhode Island's priorities is to get much more robust funding for RIPTA and for the implementation of the Transit Master Plan. And that's not an easy political lift. So any of you who believe RIPTA and transit generally should have more funding, get in touch with us, get in touch with your legislators, get in touch with the governor's office. This is, and there's a lot of federal transit funding, but the state has to come up with a match to fully capitalize on that. So I think the next year or two is going to be kind of a make or break time for advancing transit as significantly as we think there's the potential to do. John.
This is really fun to be able to come out and be with you all tonight to talk about a topic that is, I think is very exciting. But before I get into TOD, I want to make a point of, I guess, personal privilege in saying that I think that Sarah was being very modest in terms of RIPTA and its capabilities. The reality is that for those of us transit geeks and advocates in the field that pay close attention to all the numbers and the data, we know that as an agency, RIPTA uses its resources, they deploy their resources very well, the limited resources that they do have. So I share the concern about the condition of bus stops and the infrequency of service. I'm a regular passenger, except on nights like tonight when I work later, because I can't get a bus to my neighborhood at that hour. And that's got to change. Because there's such enormous potential of transit in this state, the second most urbanized state in the country. And so I'm going to start with a couple of things. One is to speak to the point that Scott just made about funding. This is data from the National Transit FTA's, Federal Transit Administration's database. Rhode Island invests as a state $18.51 per capita in transit. And when we compare that to other urbanized states in our part of the country, Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut is the next lowest one. So I said Rhode Island is $18.51. Connecticut is over $60 per capita. And then Delaware is 100. And then you move on from that to Massachusetts, that's at like 238. So it begins to show you how different states choose to invest in transit or not. And the other little fun trivia thing that I like to ask people is, in terms of what the potential is, as we talk about TOD and housing and climate, if I were to ask you, what % of our state's population do you think can walk out their front door in 10 minutes be at a transit stop? Just throw a number out. What % do you think? 30%? 3%? No, a transit stop, a bus stop, or a train station. You can walk out your front door and 10 minutes on foot, you're at a transit stop. Anything? Just 10? 60? It's 77%, which is a huge number. I mean, when I discovered that, I was like, just amazed by it. And whether transit succeeds or not, I mean, we know that one thing is true, which is that 10% of the state's population doesn't have access to a car. So there's your built-in customer base. But we've got many more people that can make good use of transit, but it needs to be able to get you where you're going, when you need to get there, conveniently, and with some level of dignity, not just a sign on a telephone pole with cars driving by splashing water on you, right? Okay, we've been there. And so we have enormous potential, but it's got to start with a state making a more serious commitment. And when to the point about municipalities, just another point is most transit agencies around the country do collect investment funds from municipalities that support the service in that community. That does not happen in Rhode Island. So we're starting from a deficit that the state doesn't invest much, and then the municipalities don't kick in to provide support for the service. So something's got to change. We can't continue to rely on a declining source of gas tax revenues to support transit. I testified on the bill last night for a legislative proposal. It's modest. It would probably add about $7.5 million a year, which is a step in the right direction. But RIPTA did prepare a funding analysis of how to fund the implementation of the transit plan. And it includes a number of ways to raise revenue, one of which could be through value capture. We're talking about transit-oriented development. That's probably the one that could yield the most amount of money, which is why we're excited about it, because it feeds into the system. It uses resources efficiently. So, all right, that was my point. I'll get off the soapbox. So we're going to talk about transit-oriented development, and I'll just start by saying, defining it. And there's any number of definitions, but the one that I like is transit-oriented development is the planning and construction of communities that create compact mixed-use neighborhoods in close proximity to high-quality transit where people enjoy easy access to housing, jobs, amenities, and services, all of life's essentials to live your life. And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean that people should be pressured to ditch their car. What it means is that maybe a family that has 3 cars in a household might drop 1 and go down to 2 and make better use of transit. Or if you've got 2 cars in your household, you go down to 1, or maybe you keep 3. There's kind of a funny saying that I think it's fictitious, but 80% of voters support better transit for other people. And that can be okay. If you just get a certain percentage of people that say, I think I'm going to get rid of one of our cars. First of all, they're going to save an average of $10,000 per year in the cost of owning and operating a car. And they get out and they get their steps in. And it only requires a little bit of that in order to achieve some of these broader goals that we collectively want to achieve, not the least of which is climate change. And one thing we know about that is that this is in the Transit Master Plan, implementing it in full would achieve 80% of the state's
goals that, not even a goal, it's a mandate. 80% of the mandate for reduced vehicle miles traveled and the related emissions. That's a huge number. There's a lot of talk about solar siting and we need to make the transition to renewable energy, which is true, we do. There's a lot of talk about converting to more electric vehicles and the charging stations, all that's important. But we shouldn't be overlooking the fact that transit plays a huge role if we step up and make the investment. So, and if we do, we'll be able to take advantage of more opportunities for transit-oriented development because there is a market demand for those types of communities. People want to live in them. We just haven't built them. We've built mostly single-family homes, subdivision by subdivision, and people tend to have a resistance to more housing because they don't want the next subdivision to go next to the subdivision that they bought into. And because why? It creates traffic, congestion. And so being able to invest in compact centers and in Aquidneck Island, you all are planning for that. You can't have TOD without the T. And it's got to be robust T. It can't just be, we're going to run a bus every hour and a half. So, so TOD is a sustainable way to accommodate the housing and job growth that we need and that we want, but to do it with less traffic, less congestion, and avoiding the development of open space and farmland that we want to conserve, which is why we actually are doing this workshop tonight, because we're building off of the study that was done by the Aquidneck Land Trust. And the only way to be able to do that is to build more compactly and actually deliver something that that the market wants, but we haven't done it. And it requires a lot of things to make that happen. So if I can go to the next slide, please. About the same time that ALT was doing the study on the build out analysis for Aquidneck Island, we were collaborating with Housing Works Rhode Island and Roger Williams University on a transit-oriented development study. And we focused on 5 communities across the state, from north to south. That was Woonsocket, North Kingstown, South Kingstown, Westerly, and Newport. And I put the chart up here for Newport. And so we had 25 graduate students who broke into teams of 5, and those teams worked in each of those communities with the planning department to determine where best that community's TOD could be situated. And best of all, they got into the level of detail to quantify how much housing could be accommodated in those districts at 3 different levels of density. So I know it's hard to see it, and I can email this presentation out for those who want to see it, but I'll just tell you that the first scenario A is a density of 10 units per acre. The scenario B in the green is 20, and the scenario C is 30. And so under those scenarios, the TOD in Newport could accommodate anywhere between about 5,000 new housing units up to about 15,000. And that would be a function of how much does the community want to densify. And that's a local decision, but at least there's the data that quantifies what kind of housing can be generated. Not only housing, but employment and jobs. And that's the one on the bottom. If you could go to the next slide, please. So typically a TOD district is about a half mile in radius. So it's what you can walk reasonably in about 10 minutes, which is that trip to the bus stop. And this is the TOD area for the north end. And I put the map over there, and I probably left one out that I should have circled there. But on Aquidneck Island, you've already been looking at these things. And in the case of Newport and Middletown, you've already made some of the zoning changes necessary to accommodate multifamily development by right, which is important. And that's where you get into the weeds of how do we actually encourage this type of development? How do we make it happen? And it requires a lot of different things. And if we can go to the next slide, this is the last one. This is a list of some things that we had GrowSmart sponsored a TOD forum back in February. Actually, Emily was there. She attended. We had a couple of hundred people, We had speakers from Pawtucket, mayors of Pawtucket and Central Falls, and the mayor of Warwick, and town manager from Warren, because they're all invested in TOD. And so we just reviewed some of the things that make it happen and how we can accelerate it. And so starting with the category of capacity enhancements in state infrastructure, we consider the transit system a vital part of that infrastructure. You can't do the TOD without the T. We do a lot of advocacy around policy. That's sort of our brand at Grossmart. That's what we focus on. And I mentioned that there was that one proposal last night that we testified on. I'll say that the Senate committee that heard it seemed very open-minded to it. I was pleased by that. They weren't disinterested. They asked good questions. There's another proposal. As a matter of fact, the Speaker of the House attended that forum, and he declared at the podium there will be TOD legislation this session. And there's actually 3 bills for TOD. One is very much of an optional zoning that says that if the community establishes a TOD district, it can apply for housing production funding to accelerate the development of housing in that district. So those things are vitally important. A lot of the things that we see up here that I put the check mark after, that signals that there's something happening in that for that item. Many of these things are things that we've poached from Massachusetts, frankly, because they have a much more robust system. They've been at this longer, and some of these proposals have already been adopted, and we get to see how have they played out and how does it work. So, for example, the one that we testified on last night, it would assign a surcharge to ride-sharing companies, not to the drivers, not to the passengers, but to the companies, 75 cents per ride. The funds collected from that would be split 50% to the municipality to make investments in the street infrastructure, the sidewalks. They can put it into bus stops if they want. And 50% would go to RIPTA toward implementing the transit master plan. So that's one step in the right direction. I'm going to kind of go quickly because I think that we're running out of time, and I want to leave some time for discussion. The zoning atlas is something that was developed by Housing Works Rhode Island, and they just sent me tonight. I wish I had them in advance. I'd have put the maps up, but they've been tracking which communities have zoning that allow multifamily housing by right. And I noticed that both Newport and Middletown have it, and they're located pretty much where the town center would be proposed at Coddington and also in at the north end. Massachusetts has another tool called 40R. It's just their sort of their statute code where they incentivize housing development by actually paying municipalities to accommodate more housing. So there's 2 components to it. They pay the community for adopting the zoning that allows TOD development, and then they pay the community $3,000 per unit produced. And that stemmed in part from concerns by communities that by accommodating more housing, multifamily housing, it was going to drive up education costs. And so, it's actually a fallacy. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do it. Only in a few rare instances does it do that, but it's enough of a reason for people to oppose housing. And so the state of Massachusetts said, we're gonna pay you to do that. And it's a constructive ride. Incentives, we've been champions for a long time of the state historic tax credit, the Rebuild Rhode Island tax credit. Those can be also very helpful incentives for development that can be applied in TOD districts. I'm going to skip to the last one. The Municipal Infrastructure Grant Program was something that we poached from Massachusetts. Their program is called MassWorks, hugely popular. They invest, it's over $100 million per year in the program, and it's competitive. So communities can apply for infrastructure funding for projects that unlock housing and other economic, because housing is economic development too, but housing and economic development in targeted locations. very much in the Massachusetts statute says in smart growth locations. And so there's a number of projects. One of my favorites is in Attleboro. Attleboro had their comprehensive plan. They wanted to encourage more housing development right at their train station. They had the land for it, but they had an old antiquated wastewater pipe about this big. And what they needed was something new about this big. The developer wasn't going to pay for that. And the community didn't really have much to put into it. So the developer partnered with the community. They made the application to MassWorks. They got a $7 million grant. They put the pipe in the ground. The developer put up not one, but 3 buildings. I think they're about 6 stories apiece, and they're all occupied. So when the train comes in, you see the buzz of activity and people are, it's becoming a more vibrant downtown. So we were able to get that enacted in Rhode Island in 2018, but the state was slow to fund it. It started off very modest. After a few years of nothing, and they put in like $1 million to Massachusetts, $100 million. And then they slowly put some more into it. And they discovered that there was a demand for it. And so communities were applying, and they could see the benefit of it. So if you hear anybody talk about that program in Rhode Island, know that it's there. There's not a lot in the bucket. So it's going to be very, very competitive, but it's an opportunity to talk to your legislators and say, we'd like to see more in that fund. So when we proposed it, we said it should be a minimum of $20 million per year for a 3-year commitment, because for those planners in the room, doing applications is a big undertaking to do a grant application, and you don't want to be doing it if you don't really think that there's any money and you're going to have gone through that process for nothing. So we're hopeful that they will increase it. We'll see. Is there anything else? Yeah. And then I put down their local zoning reform. I know that Portsmouth has also talked a lot about a town center concept. But I don't think yet that they've done the zoning reform to enable it, but it takes a lot of tools in the toolbox to attract the investment. One of the other things that I'll mention is that program in Massachusetts called HDIP, Housing Development Incentive Program, for communities that want to build market rate. A lot of times the numbers don't work for market rate. If you're proposing affordable housing, you can cobble together a lot of different incentive programs, but on the market rate, you may not, even though rents are very high, also construction costs are very high. And so there's oftentimes a gap, including in Massachusetts. And so they provide some level of assistance to help close that gap. But the key again is, and I really like this about Massachusetts, is that they tie it to their goals, their state goals. So they're not going to just subsidize it anywhere. They're going to subsidize it where it's the most efficient and where it makes the most sense. And it helps the state to achieve its broader goals. So they use their funding really as an incentive to get local governments to also be rowing in the same direction, essentially. So, and they've got a pretty good track record with it. All right. So Barry Freeman, if you're listening, we hope you're doing better. She really wanted to, she was going to join us virtually. And then she just said, I just can't do it. Her head was pounding. And I said, stay home and don't worry about it. But she was going to cover the Rhode Island portion. We do collaborate on this. Barry and I, we're both on the project management team, along with Van Buren Charitable Foundation and the pros from Tool Design. And there's an exciting project that is actually nearing completion. Let me just, so what is Rhode Island? So the origins of it are built on many already completed plans and studies that have happened over a number of years. Some of you may remember back in 2011, there was the Aquidneck Island Transportation Study. There's more recently the Newport Transportation Master Plan. There's the statewide bicycle mobility plan. What Rhode Island did was to take as much as has already been published and vetted with a lot of public input and pulled it all together into one place so that people can understand what the different options are. And it's a And it also included some additional analysis on the feasibility of some projects. There's been a lot of talk about East and West Main Road. There's been proposals in the past. DOT supports it, doesn't support it. There's been a lot of questions about it. And so it's done some additional analysis, particularly on that road. It was made possible by the generosity of the Van Buren Charitable Foundation. It wasn't publicly funded. They privately funded it because they believe in it. And it's been a privilege to serve on the project management team. So I guess next slide, please. Part of this also included a new round of some stakeholder engagement to build on all the public engagement that's taken place before, which included some focus groups. You can see the groups that are up here listed. Also interviews with some local elected officials. And the purpose. The purpose is to move Aquidneck Island in the direction as one of the most walkable and bikeable communities in the country. And just because the name of the report is Ride Island, it is much more than bikes. Bikes are hugely important, but this is also for people who want to walk, who want to push strollers. This is shared use paths, a network of them across the island, giving people more of an opportunity. We talked before about transportation choices, to give people the opportunity to get, if they're going to go on most trips are less than 3 miles that people take in the country. So if you got a half-mile trip, you got to go to a store. A lot of people would like to be able to do that on foot or on bike, but if you put your bike on East or West Main Road, I don't think I have to tell you how you're going to feel on that. So, so the final slide is a chart showing the schedule, and you can see that we've been at it since the last quarter of 2022, laying the foundation, pulling all the various reports together. Not me, that's been what tools have done, but it's coming in for a landing. The chart, you can't see it, but it says by the end of May, it's actually going to be closer to the end of June. And so for a period of about a month coming up soon, another couple of weeks, there'll be a website, an interactive website that'll have this map on it, and the map itself is interactive. And it's a chance, there's going to be a, frequently asked questions page, and there's going to be an opportunity to provide some input to it. And what it's really going to result in, and I think Ron mentioned it earlier, talking about action plans, because when you have an action plan, then you're teeing yourself up for being able to secure funding. And there's probably never been more federal funding available for this type of thing than right now. You may have heard about a major federal grant program called Safe Streets for All, SS4A, and Providence landed one about a year and a half ago, $27 million, and they had an action plan and they're implementing it. So it doesn't always have to come from the state. That can go directly from the feds to the community. And there's a lot more opportunities like that. But once again, we've got to have the ducks in a row. So doing this kind of work, doing the TOD analysis, all these things fit together. And I think that one of the other things that I wanted to point out is the importance. Can't leave without saying this. When this is done, it's finished, it'd be vitally important, because it wasn't commissioned by a single municipality or even a collection of them. It was privately funded, would be for the communities to take it up in a room like this, vet it and embrace it, include it, refer to it in your local comprehensive plan. Because it may not seem like that's an important step, but it's hugely important, particularly when it comes to getting these projects funded. So it doesn't all have to come from the state taxpayer role, but you've got to have done your homework. So I will leave it there. If anybody has any questions, I'm sorry that I went a little bit longer than I probably should have, but be happy to take any questions. And maybe I can rely on Scott to pass the microphone. No, the microphone for a question. Yeah.
Don, since we have only a few minutes left, maybe just mention the resources that are available, the transit advocacy guide, and also the recordings of the presentations that Alex mentioned from last year that have the whole section on advocacy and how to make a useful presentation if you're giving testimony.
And they can find that at ALT,
Well, the
AI, yeah, AILT.org. So Jillian mentioned the transit advocacy guide. We did a series of workshops around the state, one in Newport, actually. We had 100 people register to learn about some of the things we talked about earlier about transit and RIPTA and how people can be more effective advocating. And we had some guidebooks. They're in English and Spanish, and I'm going to leave some at the table on the way out. If you'd like to take one, you're welcome to. There's a digital version. I also left my card back there, so if anybody wants to follow up, please do. I'd welcome it. And there was one question, I think. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but that map, the interactive map, does it include?
I think it does. So Barry is the expert on that, but I'm pretty sure that there is some of that on the interactive map. As a matter of fact, if you look at this one, there is some color coding, and where you see green, and there's only a few areas of green.
That checks out.
But I believe that there's a feature of it that shows where the higher stress areas are. Yeah.
I actually have a question for Tuli. I didn't hear you mention it at the beginning, but has there been any movement on the casino? Oh, I know there was some more urban, like a shoe in for. Oh, I didn't know what that was. Oh. Yes,
Really interested in this Aquidneck Island. But there are 3 local government agents. How do you get them all together? And I guess you could say, here's the plan. Everybody says, great. Each municipality says, yes, yes, yes. Then one municipality starts and the other one doesn't. Bike track stops at the boundary of the municipality. How do you get the coordination?
A great question.
These guys together.
Yeah. And I think you were in one of the transit advocacy workshops, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
It's an issue that normally comes up with the metropolitan area.
Yes.
The most complex, very hard to resolve issue. But this is rather unusual. You know, it is an island. It should all come together.
If you asked that question maybe 5 or 10 years ago, the answer probably would have been through the Aquidneck Island Planning Commission, which I think still exists on paper, but I think it's a little bit on life support. So that's, you know, it's the kind of entity that can help to coordinate things like this across the island, because there's some issues that cross the boundaries. Transportation is one of them. A lot of them do. Obviously, climate does. And so I think that the communities have to pull that together on their own and collaborate, particularly on those opportunities that are going to cross the municipal boundary. But maybe one of our local planners wants to wait. I don't. You may know better than I.
While Ron's coming up, I think there may be a role for the state to provide incentives.
I was going to just say that, you know, the state, the DOT through the State Transportation Improvement Program, that's a good avenue for doing these larger projects that cross municipal boundaries. That East Main Road and the West Main Road shared use paths, which are TIP projects, obviously are going to be crossing municipal boundaries, and that's through hopefully construction through funding from the state. On the Aquidneck Island Planning Commission, I guess a bit of an update report that they are attempting to reinvigorate themselves. There's a new board, energy, I guess. The board is reinvigorated. And they, last I've heard, are looking at it, hiring a new executive director. So there is that push to get them more active again to do what they used to do. So. Right.
Mentioned the TIP project. The TIP, it's a state transportation improvement program. It's a 10-year budget of all the transportation projects in the state. And it takes a lot of effort to get a project on it. A lot of the projects that are on it, I mean, many of them are good and worthy, state of good repair, fixing the roads and bridges. But we've got some things on there that probably shouldn't be on there. And we've got a lot of things that are not on there that should be on there. And if anybody wants to talk about how to make that push, come talk to me. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Thanks so much.
We're about to wrap, Jillian?
There's a question on the chat. Elaboration on traffic.
Okay. Does some municipal planner want to talk about, is there a more definitive question?
Elaborate on the efforts around traffic.
Oh, efforts are, okay. Thule or Ron, you want to address that?
In Middletown's case, where the three roads that I mentioned earlier, Forest Avenue, Chases Lane, and then Paradise Avenue, those efforts, the traffic calming is mainly around signage. And then on some of the roadways, speed humps, essentially to help slow traffic down. There's other things that have been investigated. The roundabout that's being talked about at Paradise Avenue is a traffic calming measure as well. So those are the types of things at Middletown that we're working on.
Ready to wrap, Jillian? Okay, I just want to make like a minute or two of observations. First, thank you all. A lot of good questions. Hopefully you've got some good actionable information and some knowledge about where to go to get more information. I think we are at a pivotal moment in expanding transportation and housing choices for Rhode Islanders. We've got a Speaker of the House who's very supportive of more funding for housing and of transit-oriented development. We've got an unprecedented level of federal funding for transit projects. We have, I think, because of the pandemic, increased public demand for bike and ped activity, increased appreciation of how much having outdoor physical activity can improve people's lives. We've got an increased appreciation by the public health community, including the Rhode Island Department of Health, about how initiatives such as complete streets and mixed-use zoning are not only good economically and in terms of revitalizing neighborhoods, but that they're good in encouraging more physical activity and better public health outcomes. So there's a lot of ideas and plans and money potentially converging to move this agenda forward, but it isn't going to happen automatically. And there's always cross currents and resistance. And that's why you folks who are obviously committed to spend a couple hours here tonight, I would encourage you to keep engaged, keep involved, talk to civic governmental leaders. And one specific thing I want to mention that I hope you will join us in working on is resisting an effort right now at the state level to fold RIPTA into the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. I think that would be a regressive move for enhanced transit in the state. RIDOT does some things very well. They've done a great job with bridge repair, I think, but I don't think that their top priority is enhancing transit in the state. That is RIPTA's top priority. And I think we need to keep RIPTA independent of RIDOT. And so I would encourage you, if you agree with that, to weigh in, because we're going to have a battle about that in the next several months, I think. So next session is May 11th, Jillian, in Newport at Innovate Newport. And the focus will be on housing, which is obviously related to tonight's topic. And then June 8th, just to reiterate, in Portsmouth, same time of the day, of the evening, focusing on conservation and ways to have innovative approaches to conservation. Anything else, Jillian? Jillian has really organized this with Alex, and John and I get to be in the limelight, but Jillian and Alex have done a lot of the shoe leather work on this. So thank you all very much. I guess we're all probably, John, Alex, Jillian and I are probably going to be around for a while if you want to have any one-on-ones. Keep plugging. Thanks a lot.